So we are now coming to the end of Matthew's gospel account um, of Jesus's ministry and how he has been dealing with the crowds and how he has been um, traveling around and being uh, persecuted by the religious leaders, confronted, challenged, and even threatened. And so much has happened in his life up to this point with his disciples. They witnessed a ton. And so as we move in, this will be part one of chapter 26. It says, when Jesus had finished saying these things, because he had just got done talking with, with his disciples about very important issues that are going to be taking place in the future. And he says, after saying these things, he told his disciples, that the Passover is 2 days away. And this was very important, of course, for all who were Jewish to not just celebrate the Passover, but there were preparations that had to take place. And so he said, the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified. Now, an interesting thought for them to consider. Here, the Passover is something that you celebrate the passing over of the firstborn because God gave them prophetically what they needed to do with putting the blood over the doorposts and lintels, and that this Passover took place, and this is a deep celebration of God's mercy, His ability to pass over someone from death. And so it comes with hearing news right away where Jesus said that he would be handed over to be crucified. And everyone who was there under subject to Rome knew what crucifixion was. It had been happening and taking place for some time. They knew that it was just a terrible way for a criminal to die. And it says at that time, the chief priests and the elders of the people, they assembled in the courtyard of the high priest. The high priest was Caiaphas, and they conspired to arrest Jesus covertly. I mean, they were going to sneak up and grab him and kill him. That was their plan. But not during the feast, they said. We're not going to do this during the feast. Or there might be a riot among the people because they knew that the crowds were in awe of Jesus. And this would have surely created great turbulence. But right around the Passover time, they didn't want to disrupt things with the crowds. And so they said that they weren't going to do it during the feast. And while Jesus was in Bethany, in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of expensive perfume, which he took and she poured it on his head as he reclined at the table. Now, this itself had to be a great scene to watch that a woman came in. He's at a leper's home that he had healed, and some woman comes in with an alabaster jar of really expensive stuff and just cracks it open and pours it over the head of Jesus as he's reclining at the table. When his disciples saw this, they were indignant. And they asked, why this waste? This perfume, it surely could have been sold at a high price and the money could have been given to the poor. Now, this is human thinking at its best. Aren't we always concerned with wasting those things that are valuable? And in their eyes, this was valuable because it was an expensive thing that could draw in manna or money, mammon, something for them to be able to use later. So they were indignant about it. And this perfume could have been sold at a high price, they said. Well, aware of this, Jesus asked, why are you bothering this woman? Now, he knew why they were bothering this woman, but he was taking issue with the way that they were approaching this whole thing. And he clearly says next, she has done a beautiful deed to me. Now, these were his disciples. So he put them right in their place. He knew why they thought what they thought. He said, you know what? The poor will always um, will be with you. You'll always have them, but you will not always have me. By pouring this perfume, be it expensive or whatever, on me, he has prepared my body for burial. Remember, he had just told them, I'm going to be handed over and I'm going to be crucified. Truly, I tell you, he said, wherever this gospel is preached in all the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. And we're sharing that right now, remembering what she did. That she took no account with how much the cost was for this, that she was moved to pour this over the top and to be a blessing to Jesus. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, mind you, Judas Iscariot was one of the 12. All 12 of them were apostles. All 12 of them were endowed with the power of God to perform miracles. 12 of them were servants of Jesus and were his direct disciples. So at this point, even though we in hindsight know Judas Iscariot and all the things that he did and what he ended up ending his life for, at this point right here, he was just one of the 12. And it says, the one called Judas Iscariot, he went, now he broke from the 12, went to the chief priests, and he asked, what are you willing to give me if I hand him over to you? So we know that Judas used to steal from the money bag. Judas is thinking, wait, what a second. What did Jesus just say? We could have made lots of money and put more money in that money bag, profit me. And he said it was no big deal that we don't have this. It made it easy for him to think Jesus wasn't thinking rationally. And now he wants to go and get his. So he goes and he asks, what will you give me if I hand him over to you? And they set out for him 30 pieces of silver. Wow. For somebody who's just been following Jesus, who's been having to steal from the money bag, 30 pieces of silver, a pretty good price. So from then on, Judas looked for an opportunity to betray Jesus. On the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and they asked, hey, Jesus, where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover? He answered, go into the city to a certain man and tell him that the teacher says, my time is near. I will keep the Passover with my disciples at your house. So the disciples did just as Jesus said, and they went and they prepared for the Passover. When evening came, Jesus was reclining with the 12 disciples. And while they were eating, he said to them, truly I tell you, one of you will betray me. You see, Jesus already knew that Judas had gone and what he had done. Well, all 12 of them, of course, were deeply grieved and began to ask one another, surely it's not I, Lord. And Jesus answered, the one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. And maybe even at that point, some others had dipped their hand in the bowl and wondered, ooh, is he talking about me? The Son of Man, Jesus said, will go just as it is written about him. Nothing could change that. But woe to that man by whom he is betrayed. So it was going to happen. But it was Judas's desire, much like Lot's wife having to look back at Sodom and Gomorrah and turn to a pillar of salt. It was that heart condition that Judas had, probably still upset because they weren't going to protect and guard the fact that this lady was wasting money that they could have dipped into. He went to get his, and he, in his heart, thought about the world and put the world in front of heaven. Jesus said it would be better for him if he had not been born. Then Judas, who would actually betray Jesus, said, well, surely not I, Rabbi. We're talking a real sinner here. Aren't we all at times trying to bail ourselves out? And here he is lying right to the face of Jesus. And Jesus answered, you have said it yourself. While they were eating, Jesus took the bread. He spoke a blessing and he broke it. And he gave it to the disciples, saying, take and eat. This is my body. He was giving us an example of ushering in the new covenant, where we know, tells us that you must eat his flesh and drink his blood. And he's giving us a beautiful example here. Take this bread and eat it. This is my body. Then he took the cup and gave thanks, and he gave it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you. He knew that Judas was going to deceive him, but he really was there and partook with the dinner. Didn't even reveal it, because, of course, Judas would reveal himself in the end. This is my blood of the covenant, the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. He's talking about this cup that he must drink from, where he will be turned over, mockery of a trial, beat brutally, and crucified and die as a love offering from the Father to fulfill and sanctify his purpose in this world. He knew all of this. And he's sharing these words with them so they would understand that this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for the many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, Jesus said, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now until the day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. Significance here. All Jewish wedding ceremonies where they make that covenant, that attachment, where they make that commitment, they drink from the wine, and during that entire time of betrothal, until they get together for the actual final wedding, the bride can do whatever, but the bridegroom will not drink from that cup again. They drink from a cup. And he said, I will not drink from that cup again until I feast in the wedding day. That's pretty much what he's saying right here. And he goes on to say, and when they had sung a hymn, so they all got together after they broke bread, drank from the wine, they sang a hymn, and then they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, this very night, you will all fall away on account of me. You'll all fall away. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. This is hard news for them. This is an emotional time. They know that the end is near. They can hear it in Jesus's voice. They see the things that are happening. He already said that he'll be betrayed. And now they hear this from him. And then he says, but after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. Well, Peter said to him, even if all of these others fall away on account of you, I never will. And he believed that. And he shouted that, I'm sure. Truly, I tell you, Jesus said, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter replied, even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you. And all the other disciples, of course, said the same thing. And that concludes part 1 of chapter 26 of Matthew's gospel account of Jesus preparing to surrender himself like a lamb to the slaughter. The shepherd himself becoming a lamb. Amen.